Welcome back to the show. My name is Stanley, and today we have a very special guest. His name is Josh Lieb, and today we're talking about his service in the Navy. We talk about his approach to training and fitness, the loss of his best friend, stress and anxiety, and how he manages it all. Let's get right to the episode.
And they're like, all right, well, you guys can do your jobs in the ship. And the guys are like, well, we don't know how to do anything. And they put this really scared guy on this radar thing. And he's like, the ship's like burning and everything. He's like, the green thing's moving towards the red thing on this radar. It's like a missile coming for me. He's like, and I think we're the red thing and the green thing. So funny.
Galaxy what?
Galaxy Quest.
Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, it's so funny. Oh, God. Yeah, I'm a liquid breather like my dad. Name's Josh Lieb.
Perfect.
Grew up in Portland, Oregon. Moved to Estacada in 1990-something, 96, when I was 10. So I kind of grew up in the city for the first 10 years of my life, and then grew up in the country for another 8 years-ish, right around there. Yeah, and then when I turned 18, I moved to Europe, backpacked, ended up living in Paris. Basically lived there as long as I could.
Why is that?
Money, when you're 18, you don't have a lot of it, so especially when you're backpacking and doing hostels and all that. So came home. Yeah, from there, I got a job, my first job at Bimart, which was interesting.
In Estacada?
No, it was in a place called Damascus, which was outside Estacada.
Okay.
And they put me in the electronics section.
That's where you got your love for games came
No,
on?
definitely not. I've actually, all it did was make me hate the movie Night at the Museum. Because he would play the same fucking movie over and over and over again. And I told my manager, I'm like, can I bring in like something G-rated? Like, I don't care if it's anything, dude.
This?
I'm like, mermaid, whatever. Like, just change this movie, because I would be there for 8 hours and the movie would just rotate. And that was back in the day when they played the sound on the TV, so you could get a feel for the TV. And it was just blasting Night at the Museum, and I just passionately hate that movie. Anyways, so yeah, I worked at Bimart. And then one of my best friends from high school, who was a foreign exchange student from South America, Pablo, he ended up getting this girl pregnant, and he was visiting, and he needed a place to stay, and my dad absolutely loved him. Yeah. And my parents were divorced, so my dad's like, yeah, Pablo can come stay at the house. And I was still living at home, like just trying to, I don't know, just figure it out. Yeah, I was 19 then. So yeah, I lived in Europe for about a little less than a year, came home, worked at Bimart. Pablo came. And he's like, listen, I want to do this business. I know that, because in high school I was, business savvy with certain things, illicit things. And he knew about those things, and he thought I had the drive and the hustle to help him with his business.
That's cool.
So I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll go. And I had some money saved up, so I went to Mendoza, Argentina to sell shoe polishing machines.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Really? I thought I told you that. Yeah,
maybe,
so
maybe.
It kind of looked like a soda machine, how it has like the big can of Pepsi on the front and the buttons you push, except you put your shoe in the bottom of it with it on, and it would come down and buff and polish your shoe.
How'd you get those?
I have no idea. He brought me in just to go and be a salesman with it.
Wow.
And then I was working with a graphic designer. We were designing the logo. He thought I was really clever and artistic with stuff like that, so that was kind of my side of things. And then going out, we were mainly selling to airports, like motels.
And they would buy them?
Well, we had a list on it, so we had a list of people that were open to it.
Okay.
And his dad gave us $100,000, but it was a weird situation.
Sounds weird.
Well, because he was very well off.
Okay.
And
Pablo
was.
Right.
Pablo Patasny. Shout out to Pablo.
Wherever you are, Pablo.
Yeah, he's still there. He's doing well, though. But yeah, anyways, his parents didn't speak English.
Okay.
And at the time, I'm this lanky, tattooed kid living in their house, and they don't really have a grasp on what I'm doing or why I'm there. At least I didn't. Pablo said he would explain it to him. But there was a vibe that I was like, I felt.
You're like, they don't know what I'm doing
intrusive,
here.
Like I just felt kind of, and I wanted to explain myself, and I was trying to be a better person at that time. Like I really was like there to work and get shit done. And he would just go. He's like, oh, I'm going to go work with my brother. So I'll be home at around 2. So I would just be at the house chilling. And his parents would see me just like.
Just there?
Just hanging out. I had no smartphone. I had no computer. So I'm just chilling in this neighborhood. And over time I made friends and, you know, I would get out of the house and stuff. But initially I felt like such a mooch, which is the worst feeling ever that I could have.
So how old were you?
I was 19.
19, okay.
So yeah, we would slowly, it would go in chunks, you know, we'd get a little business done, and then he would be like, let's go out. And it'd be like, oh, it's Wednesday. He's like, yeah, I already got Red Bull vodka, what do you want? And so we'd go out and just go to these crazy parties and go to these nightclubs and, you know, chase girls like you do at 19 and all that. And then one day he comes in and he sits down and he's just like, I don't think it's going to work out.
Like you stayed there?
Just everything.
Just everything.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
everything.
just
in Pablo's world, it was just like, my dad was like, he wants me to like be a doctor or whatever.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah, I was like, damn, okay, well. He's like, so, I was like, so I need to go. He's like, kinda, yeah. I was like, no worries, dude, but I don't have any money. So I ended up selling it was a PS3, and electronics there, people don't know this, but back then electronics were like 5-fold what they are here. So I actually made my first big chunk of money by I think I brought a bunch of computers, PlayStations, bunch of stuff. Like
just a bunch of electronics.
Yeah, but crazy money. So I sold a used PS3 to get home for like $1,500, dude. Yeah, $1,500 with like 2 controllers. Yeah, it was wild. And the guy was stoked too. He was like, "Oh my God, thank you."
Is this for the future?
Is this a PS5? In 2000 and
whatever.
When was it? Yeah, 2008.
Jeez.
Yeah, so came home after that, and that's when things went a little south for me. That's when I realized a lot of people that I was hanging out with were not going anywhere. Because I had these big monumental moments, and I'd come home, want to share it with everybody, and things were just kind of in neutral. Yeah. Every time I came, it was kind of like the same thing, but not in a good way.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the back of a car, hanging out with my buddies. I just got back, it's like maybe 2-3 weeks, and they're doing lines of Oxy and Vicodin and crushing up pills and doing off the dashboard and stuff. And the dogs are barking.
It's all good.
And that's when I realized, like, and I never did any of that. Like, I always thought it was gross to take stuff up your nose. Honestly, that was the only thing. It wasn't like a moral, like, high ground of, like, you guys are pieces of shit and there's no way in hell because, you know.
Yeah, you're just like,
I was just like, yeah, I don't want to put it up my nose. And, but there was just kind of like this uneasy feeling.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when, I don't know, I was just kind of taking in my surroundings. My dad was putting a lot of pressure on me as far as like, you know, what the hell are you doing? He ended up kicking me out of the house. You know, not like all my stuff was outside, but he was just like, you can't be here anymore.
Right.
So figure it out in the next couple of weeks. And so I had a really big fuck you attitude towards just about everybody. I felt like my family was just kind of like almost done with me in a sense. That's what it felt like. Like they're all just kind of waiting, and then they got impatient, and then now they don't care about anything that I'm doing. Yeah. Because before I was like the world traveler and living abroad and starting a business and, you know, doing all these things. And so I came back and just, yeah, it was just really unusual to come back like that and see all of that. And then all my buddies were dropping out of college or just not around, getting into drugs, selling drugs, catching felonies, you know, dying, you know, overdosing. So, yeah, I just had this real defensive attitude about it. So I went to the Marines and I was like, oh, okay, I'll go infantry and I'll go die. And then you guys will feel real bad. And that, honestly, that was kind of like, I was reading a lot of books about just stuff like that. Like I read this book called Generation Kill about this Marine group that was going into Baghdad. And anyways, just kind of getting my mind ready for what I was going to get into. And I just thought the military was a good avenue for me because maybe subconsciously I needed structure or discipline or all that. But just I was always looking for that next adventure, and I knew I wasn't ready for school.
Okay.
If that was ever going to be in the picture, right? Because in high school, it's like,
You're just
I could care less about anything that was going on there. Like, I loved to write. I was a big reader. But if it was anything that was just like this weird niche subject that didn't make any sense.
like something you couldn't apply to life.
Yeah, like algebra. Math. Not that that's what I was
Yeah.
pointing to, but
Right,
just
right,
in
right.
general, like if it didn't interest me, and I was a smart kid, but I just didn't want to. I just wasn't involved.
Right.
So I knew school wasn't in the cards. So it was like, what's my next little adventure that I can go on where I don't have to pay for it?
Sure.
And the military was that. And then I brought a bunch of my buddies there. And in the end, the Marines didn't really pan out. That guy was an asshole. And I just remember, like, this guy's way too gung-ho for me. I'm not that patriotic.
Yeah.
And then I signed up with the Army. I was going to be an Army Ranger. I literally had everything done with the Army. I spent months with this recruiter, like doing all my tests, getting ready for the ASVAB, what little they could help me with that. And so I brought all my buddies to join the Army because some people don't know this, but if you bring people and have them sign up with you, you can have, like, if you and I were going to join together, right, when we're 18, we'd do what's called the buddy program.
Okay.
And you and I would go to boot camp together.
Oh, nice.
That's all that it meant. It didn't mean you'd be in the same division. Honestly, you probably wouldn't even see each other. But you'd have the buddy program. But on top of that, you'd also get promoted. So if I brought you and you got enrolled with me or enlisted with me, I would get E2. And then if I brought more people in, more than 2, I'd get E3. It takes you, I forgot what it was, but basically a year, 2 years to go from E1 to E3.
Okay.
And then once you reach E3 automatically, you have to take the petty officer test.
Okay.
And that's like a $800 jump in your paycheck. It was a pretty big deal.
Oh, wow.
I might be exaggerating, but it was a lot. Yeah. Back then, it was a lot. And so I get all these guys with me, and they're like, hey, come check out the Navy recruiter first. And of course, we all sign up with the Navy.
Yep.
And my buddy Josh Nelson got E3 that day. I was so fucking mad because I brought everybody with me, and he's like, oh, they're cool next door. Come check them out. And I just went up to the recruiter, and I leaned in. I was like, I don't want to be a Navy SEAL, but what's the most dangerous thing? What's the most dangerous job you have? And he just pointed at this poster on the wall, and he was like, you're going to be an AB and work on the flight deck. It's like, okay, done. Sign me up. And that was it, really. That's kind of how it all came to be. But that year, so I signed up in December. They weren't sure when I was going to get shipped out. And around that time, my grandpa got cancer. And so I talked to my dad. I said, I might not ship out until this next fall. This was like December 2008 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I said, it's like January, February. I told my dad, like, I don't know when I'm going to leave, but I know Papa's in hospice, and how about I just live there? And I said, the only thing I ask is I need food because I want to get ready for boot camp and everything, and I will bust my ass, take care of Papa and help Grandma. I'll live here. And then if you can take me to the gym at least 4 times a week, I'll do that. Because that way, A, I don't have to get a job, and B, I can help Grandma and be there with Papa.
Right.
Because he was there for me. My grandma raised my cousins, my grandpa raised me. So my grandma would be at my cousin's house when they got home from school, and Papa would be at my house. So I had a really close connection with him. We didn't always get along, but I had a really strong bond. And I lived with my grandma that year waiting to get ready. And that was kind of the birth of me getting into fitness too. Because once I got him situated and my grandma situated, I had nothing else to do but
work out,
read, think about what I was going to, get myself ready for and work out.
Yeah.
and it was all push-ups, basically calisthenics. There's a track across the street. I was playing soccer still at that time, and just really, it was all calisthenics based, jump roping, running hard, because I was really insecure about getting to boot camp, not being in shape. And so fast forward, Grandpa dies July 24th, and I go to boot camp, when was it? October something, early October, which was good. I wanted him to hang on as long as he could, but I also wanted him to pass away before I left. And it was coming. It wasn't like this thing that,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, that was the first time I watched anybody die, and just sitting there watching him die, and then he died in front of me. It's a really unusual feeling, especially when you're in a house, with all these great memories. But that gave me an edge. That was the first time I felt like I had an edge, and I had like this fucking drive from that, because that was tough, obviously, but I just used that as fuel. And so when I got to boot camp, I was fucking ready to go, that's for sure. And I showed up really insecure, and when I got there, I was like, what the fuck what was everybody doing getting ready for this? So, and I like to tell this story because I didn't know it at the time, but this is what made me a big chunk of who I am today as far as a trainer. Because when I got there, I mean, I was shredded. I was in good shape. Like, I was cardiovascular wise, no one was touching me. No one could outwork me. I'd gotten to a point where I was doing, sets of 80 on push-ups. If I pushed it, I was doing 100. I mean, I was dialed in, and I was insecure about it because I thought everybody was going to be dialed in. Yeah. And it bit me in the ass because I show up and I'm smoking everybody. And my whole idea was like, I'm going to go under the radar when I get to boot camp. Like, I'm just going to float on through, do what I'm told, not get up. I didn't want any extra responsibility. You don't really know what you're getting into. Mm-hmm. People can tell you about it all day, but it's 10 weeks of just random stuff day in and day out. No one can encapsulate that all and get you ready for it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what they do in boot camp is they single people out, whether they think they're a good leader or whether they think they need to be a leader. Mm-hmm. And they thought I needed to be a leader because I was so always in the back. I was always a kid in the back of the bus. I never wanted to be up front. I wasn't raising my hand. I was very shy and reserved. And they sniffed that shit out in boot camp hard. They look for it. And I had no idea they were looking for it because I just figured, they don't want me, Mr. Passive, pacifist Josh in the background. They don't want me to be a leader. Who the hell is going to listen to me? So yeah, after the first few PT tests, they're like, hey, you're athletic petty officer and you're going to lead all PT. And really what that meant was I had to get up in front of 75 sailors and literally scream stretches out to everybody. The next stretch is, grab your quad or whatever the stupid shit they were having us do. It was so dumb. And, just warming everybody up. I had to take everybody's numbers down. So you'd have like partner, like you count my numbers, I count yours. I'd walk by, get it there, give them the sheet, all that kind of stuff. Just a little responsibility. You'd have rank. People had to answer to you. So that made things a little bit easier, but you also had to be careful because if you're turning everybody in and you're Mr. Sheriff at night, nobody's there to protect you, and it's fucking scary at night. People don't talk about that, but there's no one watching anybody at night. They'll have petty officers and stuff roaming the halls and coming in and checking. They always come in and check. But there were multiple fights at night, grown-ass men crying, getting their asses beat. So you had to be real careful about, you kind of had to get to know people first. So those first couple of weeks, you're not even allowed to talk to each other. So you don't really have an idea of anybody, and you're in a huge room with a bunch of people. It's like an open bay jailhouse, basically. So you got to be real careful in the beginning. So yeah, they made me athletic petty officer, and I had to lead fitness it was like a boot camp of leading fitness, basically. And so yeah, that was kind of like the catalyst and that wasn't like, oh, I really want to do this for the rest of my life. You know, it's not like that made me want to be a personal trainer, or even a coach in general. But yeah, in retrospect, that was kind of where that gave me the confidence, you know, to go get up in front of people, teach the seminars like I do with Precision and everything, and just be confident and comfortable with what I'm saying and doing and all that. So yeah, and got through boot camp, obviously, and shipped out to Florida. From Florida, I went to Bremerton, Washington. So I got to choose, you get to choose your orders depending on how you do in A school, right? So wherever you take in the class is what orders you get to pick.
Okay.
So they'll have 30 orders. If you are the highest scoring person in the class, you get to pick first. You want Japan, you want Virginia,
sure,
you want San Diego, you want whatever. And I just thought, well, if I'm out on deployment 6 to 9 months a year, why the hell would I want to go to Japan? You know, like I might as well be close to home, because if you go to Japan and you go on deployment, you get back from deployment, it's a $1,700 ticket to come home for Christmas.
And you're paying that.
And you're paying that. Yeah, they don't give a shit. They just keep you in Japan. They don't care. You know, they pay for the necessities of where you need to go. Like if you're switching duty stations, they'll pay for your plane ticket. The military has unlimited wealth, and they're the most frugal people in the whole fucking world. To put it in perspective, I went to A school, right? I placed third in my class, so I got to pick third orders. Nobody wants Bremerton anyways, so I could have taken last and still got it. So I choose Bremerton, and I got stuck in Florida for 3 months because they didn't want to pay for my $400 plane ticket at a certain time. They wanted it to come down a little bit. But we can go and give Ukraine, $35 billion for some missiles, but when a little sailor needs to go from Florida to Bremerton, Washington in the United States, and it's, you know...
Why is that though? Like,
I have no idea.
That's
but
crazy.
but it was awesome. So I had a team in Florida, and it was the best job I ever had in my life was in Florida. It was so cool. I got to work with Blue Angels senior chief, and he was awesome. And he had this civilian contractor who was a Vietnam vet. It was just this super badass guy, and we just drove forklifts everywhere, loading equipment and hanging out and shooting the shit with these guys and taking all the wisdom we could from them. It was a good time, definitely, for about 2 months. Then I go to the hellhole Bremerton and get to my carrier. And yeah, I went out to sea a lot. I never went on deployment. I didn't have a spectacular naval career because, and this is a big moment in my life, I got in a street bike accident hitting a deer. And that was a big sort of turning point in my life for sure, both good and bad. So yeah, I was on the carrier for a while, got back, I got off the carrier, ended up buying a street bike. Long story short, got a street bike and came to visit my dad. And I was in for about 2 years at this point. Went to visit my dad, just got home from being out to sea. See, people don't realize this, I need to backtrack. But you go out to sea a lot, doesn't mean you go on deployment. So they have things called sea trials and underways. Underway is like practice for a deployment. So you go down the coast, you go to San Diego, you pick up about 60-ish aircraft, and then you go out way out into sea, and you just do flight ops all day.
And so that's not
all night.
That's not deployment.
It's not a deployment. Yeah. The difference with deployment is you're getting closer to other countries and flexing on them. That's what a deployment is. You get close, you run flight ops.
You show them what.
You show them that we're here, and then we also would do bombing runs.
Okay. Yeah.
So when we're underway, there's no live ammunition on the ship. Those pilots are just going out, they're running their drills, they're bombing sections of the water or whatever.
Right.
They come back, they do their notes, and it's $1 million a day, you know? It's 30 grand, I think.
Crazy.
30 an hour, $30,000 an hour to fly. Something like that. I'm close. It's not exactly that, but it's right around.
Because of the fuel?
Yeah, fuel. I mean,
everything.
Manpower.
Yeah.
You have a lot of civilians on the ship too. People also don't know that. You've got about, I think there's maybe like 50 to 100 civilians on the ship.
Wow.
Contractors. That we had a personal trainer.
Yeah.
Who was dealing with all the fat sailors.
Perfect.
Yeah, they called it Fat Camp. I got into the Navy right when things were becoming more PC. You know, like I got in right when it was don't ask, don't tell. I got in right when they were doing a uniform shift. I got in right when they were really cracking down on hazing. So I was kind of the last division or two to come through that was still getting hazed, that was still kind of old Navy of like, and when I say old Navy, people laugh in my face, but when I say old Navy, it's like late 80s, 90s Navy.
Okay. Because
women weren't even allowed in the Navy until like 1994.
Okay.
Something like that, on ships at least. So yeah, I was still kind of in that old Navy hazing group, which I loved. It was great. I still feel like people need to get hazed just
a little bit.
A little bit, but not, not in a bullying kind of way. It's like, hey, go run these papers to the office. It's like a 20-minute walk that way. Just like you're tacking on more, like they're doing the bitch work, as we would say back then.
Right.
So that kind of hazing. And then, you make them wear a funny hat or something. I don't know. Just shit like that.
Yeah.
Some hazing got out of hand, though. People get hurt.
Right.
Fighting, stuff like that. So I understand that they had to crack down on it, but anyways, got off track there, but that's kind of the difference. So we would go out to sea all the time, and you'd be out there for weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
No days off, just working. That's when I realized, holy shit, this is really hard. And I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I was a great sailor. Like, I worked hard. But, I'm not a manual labor type kid. I'm a spoiled only child, you know what I'm saying? So anyways, I get back from sea one day, and this is the first time I've ever had money. I'd never had money like that before. I would sell weed and, different things. We can get into that later. So I had too much money when I was younger. No 16-year-old needs thousands of dollars in cash, but that was kind of money I had to hang on to make money. You know what I mean?
Yep.
This was the first time I had a bank account with money in it, and got back and bought my street bike with my buddy Cruz. And it was awesome. It was one of the best days of my life. Go into the dealership, give them the money. It's all your hard-earned money for the first time in your life. You're already proud because you're a sailor, And I rode that bad boy right off the lot inside the store. I almost hit the doors on my way out because I'd never ridden a street bike before. Neither had Cruz. He was from the Philippines, and he's like 5'3" on this giant bike. And we rode in the parking lot for 15 minutes before we got on the freeway back. Yeah. And I look at him and I slide my helmet up, and we're like goofy, the tag is still like flapping on the bike. It's like we're super green. And I was like, all right, man, you ready? And the guy told us specifically, when you get a new bike, you can't go over 60 miles an hour for like the first 100 miles or something. You have to break in the engine.
Oh, okay.
Sure. So we're just like on these bright colored bikes, like in the slow lane, cars are passing us. And we get back to base, but you can't have it on base. You have to have it off. You have to get it registered and everything. So I kept it at my buddy's house. But basically every weekend I would go home. And it was awesome. I loved that thing. Days like this, I think about it all the time. I really do. I think about it every day, just about. I miss it. But anyways, going back to what I mentioned earlier, I go to visit my dad, and I was seeing this girl at the time, and she wanted to ride on my bike the next day. So I got in Friday night. She wanted to go out Saturday. I'd never had a passenger on that thing. And by this time, I'm a seasoned rider. Like, I know how to ride. I've been riding for about a year.
Okay.
And I grew up riding dirt bikes, and so it's not like I was...
You have experience.
I had experience, right. Yeah. Once you get the turning down on a street bike, everything else falls into place. It's very similar to really any motorcycle. So, yeah, I asked my buddy if he could get on the back, and I gave him a helmet and my gear and everything. And there's where my dad lives, outside Estacade, it's like a loop, right?
Yeah.
Curve, it's beautiful up there, all through the woods and everything. Bunch of great turns, and it was just a good little practice course for me to just kind of feel the weight, figure out the braking, because when you have another body on a bike and you go to brake,
It's different.
It's different, yeah. You got to be careful. And that's the irony of it. I was trying to be careful. And we're about 5 miles in. It's a 10-mile loop. Wasn't speeding, I would admit that. I wasn't speeding. The only thing I did wrong was what happened. I came into a corner, a big bend, a fun corner. At this point, I got it down. I'm just ready to go home. Right. I figured it out. I'm like, oh, this isn't that bad. I come around the corner, and where I fucked up was there's this hill like this. So the corner goes here, there's a hill, and this is at dusk. And the beam is so bright on the bike that the headlight goes here, and there's this pool of darkness here.
Yep.
And so the one mistake I made was I accelerated into the bottom, not knowing it was there. But I know those roads like the back of my hand. That was my problem. Is I knew it was a little dip. It'd come up. I'd go into my next turn. So I go to accelerate, and I see a deer like last second, and I lock up both brakes, but because of the weight, I endoed, and my last memory is I endo onto the deer's back, and my mouth is in its fur. Like I remember its fur in my fucking mouth. That was my last memory. And and then I wake up, and I'm about 20 yards from my bike in the ditch because Gary had got me off the street. No, I have no helmet on.
Because you gave...
No, I had a helmet on. He had taken it off like an idiot. I could have broken my neck, but I think he wanted... Because I had blood all over my face. I had completely rubbed my nose off, and I rubbed my chin off.
Yeah.
So I had blood all over my face. My windshield was broken. My whole helmet was like shaved down. It was like white on the front. I had slid on my face for so long. But he was walking around. That's what's so wild about this is he was just walking around on the phone with the ship. He didn't even call the police. That's what's wild when you read the transcripts, because they had to do an investigation of this. The transcripts are wild because we're in complete shock. And we're just like, hey, tell Chief we can't make it. They're like, what the fuck are you guys doing? You're in a wreck? Call the police. Tell Chief we can't, it's just like over and over on repeat.
Sure, yeah.
Josh is hurt. We only thought I was hurt because my pants were gone.
Sure.
I have flesh hanging off my knees. All I could think about were my knees because I had broke my patellas, and I had rocks in my flesh. And talk about pain, dude, because I was full of adrenaline there. My shoulder was completely destroyed, hanging down. I didn't even fucking notice it because my knees hurt so bad. Right. That's how wild it was. I snapped all the tendons in my right hand. I broke my wrist. I broke my pinky finger. Knees, shoulder. And so I was visibly just destroyed. Just absolutely. I had road rash everywhere. My jacket's all ripped up. Yeah, and this part is one that kills me, but so they didn't find us for about 3 hours because the service was really bad. We were losing phone service, so we were bleeding out. And I wasn't sure. Like you just don't know. You don't have an objective lens in that situation. There's no light other than my bike that's completely destroyed on the street beaming across.
This is at like 9 o'clock at night?
This is probably at 8, and in the boonies though. And we're in between houses. We're in an area, unfortunately, where it was like most of the houses were on this side, so people would come in this side of the loop, and most of the houses were on this side, so people would come this way. You never had people coming through the whole loop. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So no one found us for 3 hours. That's how bad it was. And I remember laying in the ditch with Gary and just like accepting that something bad could happen. Sure, and we just were totally comfortable because the adrenaline was so high. It's like when you go to the hospital and you're nervous and they give you morphine, you're like, this isn't so bad. It felt like that. It was really bizarre. Yeah. And I only remember bits and pieces because I had just suffered a severe concussion. Right. Full of adrenaline. My body is just covered in blood and in pain. But anyways, the cops show up. they shine the light on Gary, and basically the back of his fucking skull is hanging off. And he is completely soaked in blood. Completely. And what had happened was I didn't show him how to tie a helmet down. Oh. That's where I made a mistake, is because I grew up with it. So I knew through both, and then in the middle, pull it through, cinches it down. He didn't know that. He just put it on.
Right.
And it came off midair, and he landed on his head on the street at 45 miles an hour. And he had no idea. He was just talking, and I'll never forget, he's just talking to the cops, and it's just bouncing here. And you can see his fucking brain. Like, you could see it. And I remember standing there, and I was like, I just was in disbelief. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. Every time I think about it, it's wild. And yeah, so they shine the light on me. I see that, and they immediately call for life flight because he had lost an insane amount. I mean, there's blood everywhere. Yeah, so we got in the ambulance together, and I don't really remember much as far as that. I remember hearing the helicopter, him getting picked up, and then me just kind of in and out of consciousness till we got there.
Right.
And then I woke up, and the rest of it's really a blur. I was in the hospital for about 8 days. I just kept telling about my knees. I remember that. I was like, when does this stop? They're like, well, the bone bruising is actually what's causing it more than the fractures.
Sure, yeah.
And then I remember I had a bunch of people, all my Navy buddies showed up. It was awesome. I had so many people come and see me. It was the first time that I felt like
Supported,
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of people there. A lot of Navy guys drove down to come and check on us because we were good dudes. Like, Gary and I were really good sailors. We were well known. We're hard workers. So it was cool to see that support system come down. And I mean, it was double digits as far as people that took that 3.5 hour drive to come see us.
Yeah.
On Liberty too, not even on, anyways. Yeah, and they just came in, they're like, hey, we're gonna take you in for surgery today. And I was like, on what? To get the rocks out of my knees? I remember being really like scared because I didn't know what it was. I had no inclination that my shoulder was messed up.
Not yet?
No, I had no idea. I literally had no idea.
Wow.
Because I had dislocated it a bunch.
Sure.
But I had never, so I knew it hurt, but I didn't realize that I completely crushed my rotator cuff.
Wow.
So yeah, they wheeled me in and, basically counted to 10, technically like 1 or 2. And I woke up and they had put basically like a T-shaped piece of titanium in to create my rotator cuff. And and that changed my entire life because after that, it was physical therapy. It was checking on Gary the best I could because he had a lot of brain damage and trauma, and he was having his struggles that were far worse than mine. And over time, I mean, they were just they were investigating us to see if we did it on purpose. It was a big deal. They had JAG come in, which are naval lawyers, interviewing people because they thought we did it to get out of going on deployment.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty wild, but that's how shitty some of the people are in the military.
They'll do something on purpose.
Yeah, they'll go in the gym and they'll take a dumbbell and they'll break their foot.
Sure.
Or they'll fall down on the stairs on purpose, break their forearm. That way they don't have to go out to sea. And we just weren't like that. That just wasn't us. And after they interviewed a bunch of people and figured us out, they were like, yeah, these guys are just two dummies on a street bike that got unlucky, basically. And so because of my injuries, my range of motion was off. I couldn't get my arm, above my head. And some of the shit you have to do is you're like getting stuff over your head. You have a very dangerous role. And they just decided to let me go. So I worked in the military. I worked for another year after that in the Navy. I wasn't like, I got hurt and they let me go. There's a long process to that. And I ended up running this barracks for this submarine. And I ended up doing that, like I said, for a year. But during that time, then they put me in charge of training all the disabled sailors. So I had to go and take these sailors. A lot of them were pregnant or they were injured. So they'd go down and I'd have to run them again through stretches and give them ideas on weightlifting. And at this time I had been weightlifting a lot. I'd gotten into it and just kind of following advice from people. And it was basically bodybuilding, but I didn't even know it. So I had a background at that point of like, oh, you can, train your arms. You don't have to train your legs if your knee hurts or whatever. And I just kind of like, they gave me the permission to go and help people do that. And my physical therapist would give me these exercises, and I was like, I'm in this to get it done and do it. And but the recovery was rough, and I got addicted to opiates at that time. I was just slamming Vicodin left and right to take the pain. I had to sleep in a brace like this. I couldn't move my arm. I couldn't externally rotate it. It wrapped around my stomach. And it was this hard metal thing, and I had to sleep at night like that, and I couldn't sleep on my back. So I would take Vicodin to fall asleep, and I had plastic fingertips. I had to wear these plastic cups over my fingers,
Sure.
And when I would shower, I'd have to take my brace off, put it against the wall, and then take the finger off, put it against the wall, and wash it like this. I'm not kidding. For 9 weeks, I had to do that. And then when they took the plastic fingers off, they're like, we don't even know if they're going to be fixed. So let's see. I remember taking them off, and I'm like, my hand was shaking.
Yeah.
And they're like, go ahead and bend. And I was like, oh my God, thank God. And they reconnected.
So I would have been so
Oh my
scared.
God, yeah, I was so scared. Because they're like, put these little mannequin plastic fingers on, and hopefully it reconnects them. And you got to tape them, and you got to wash them. And yeah, so very thankful, everybody, that I have my hands still. That's huge.
That's a blessing. That's crazy.
So yeah, they did that, put me in charge of all that, and then I did my civilian transition program class thing, and I got out about a year early, so I did about 3 years. I should have done 4.
Wow.
And they gave me my GI Bill, so I went to school. I went to PSU, and my cousins were playing soccer there, and my best friend was dating my cousin at the time, and I was like, what does PSU have to offer me? And I looked up some of their programs, and at that time I was getting into fitness. I was like, college isn't going to get me a job, because I'm like, I'm going to be a cop, or I'll be a firefighter, even though I was like, they weren't going to accept me with the shoulder anyways, but that was kind of like, I'll figure it out type deal. But I was like, if I want to go to school, I want to go and learn about something that I'm into.
Right.
So why not have this free $100,000 to spend at a school and learn about, and just be like a badass fitness guy, and then do a 9 to 5.
Right.
That was my whole idea. So all just like another adventure, right? I was like, I had the Navy. What else is free, that I can ride out? And they would pay you to go to school. It was great. So I wish people would join the military more often. I mean, I was getting paid like $2,000 a month to go, and they would pay for school.
Right.
And a $500 book stipend. And I'd buy used books and
It's like, why wouldn't
take
you do
that money too. So yeah, I got my health studies degree, and
That's kind of how it all started, huh?
yeah, I mean, I really shouldn't have gone to PSU, because they ended up leaving a year. Their senior year was my freshman year, and then I was just there by myself, and it was kind of like, which was also good too, to just be new, a little bit older, because at that time I was 23 going into college. Most kids were like 18, right?
Right.
So that was a good experience, kind of being on my own, even though, yeah, I'm back home. Yeah, and so I just got my health studies degree, and during that process, I decided to do a bodybuilding show.
Yeah.
Just to have the experience. I was training people on the side at that time, charging $30 an hour in cash. I had like 2 clients maybe.
Yeah.
And then I signed up for that bodybuilding show in 2015, which was my junior year of college, just because it was kind of gaining popularity, and I wanted to see if I could do it, because I was getting good at it, I thought. And went to that show. I won my class and then got totally smoked. It was awesome. It was good to lose. You should lose your first show.
Yeah.
But I had no expectations. I went into it. I shook everybody's. I'm a very good loser when it comes to that kind of a sport, because it's subjective. You know, it wasn't like a numbers thing where I'm mad that I didn't get the certain time, or I didn't score the goal, or whatever.
Right.
And because of that show, posted pictures. Then my current bosses were, they had reached out to me, Lacey and Trevor.
Yep.
And they said, hey, are you thinking about personal training? And at that time, I really hadn't even thought about it. It was just kind of like a side thing. And, but, I had a degree in health studies, physical activity and exercise. We were designing programs for athletes. At that point, I was like, oh, could I be a strength coach at the collegiate level? Could I find my way to the Timbers, dream job, or what I thought was a dream job? And that was kind of where I was. And so I had to do an internship.
Yeah.
And so I got in my senior year and I asked them if I could do the internship with them because they're a small business. It checks out. My counselor said it was a good idea. So I did it, and my buddy Craig actually did it too, and he was coming out of Oregon State with an exercise science degree, and we did the internship together. And then Craig ended up going to Orange Theory, and he's killing it there, but Craig, I was surprised that you did that. He went to Orange Theory, he's killing it, and I decided to stay. I was like, I mean, I got to start somewhere, I might as well. And I was interning at other gyms too. Lacey and Trevor didn't know that. But I was at different facilities, not like 24 LA, but just different kind of, not mom and pop, but just different. I wanted something that was different. I did not want to be a run-of-the-mill basic trainer at 24. And I know a lot of great trainers at 24 in LA. I have met them. They exist. But it just wasn't the prestige that I wanted. I felt like with my background and my level of fitness that I could offer more than what maybe the general person there is looking for.
Right.
So I decided to go with Lacey and Trevor, and then I finished my degree, and really that's kind of where I'm at now. I did a couple more shows just to get a victory, and that's really how I ended up where I am right now.
Well, for you specifically, how do you view training other people, especially in the one-on-one situation as of today?
What do you mean, like, how do I view it? How do I feel about it, or like what is my sort of
kind of like what's your approach?
My approach.
Yeah. What's your approach to it, to training in general? And I'm sure a lot of the training that you do reflects a lot of what other people, the people that are training with you, they do.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, early on, I just thought everything was, this nail and I had a hammer. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I didn't know, right? So I'd do a lot of isolation work, a lot of shit that people did not need. I wasn't, training the planes of motion correctly, all these different things. So it kind of started out with people wanting to be, it was all aesthetically driven in the beginning.
Right.
And then as I continued to get certifications, going through college, obviously, reading, getting recommended books by my favorite strength coaches, I had a lot of good people that I looked up to. Lacey and Trevor, they had a hand in my upbringing too, of like their approach. Trevor was really good in that sense. Lacey was good on presentation, because training it's an element of a bit of, as entertaining.
Yeah.
Right? People want to feel like you know what you're doing. They want to be entertained, and they want to feel like they did something.
Right.
So you have to find the right balance of those things, and then you also have to have the ability to work with different personality types, which is another...
it's a skill.
It's a skill, yeah, and that takes years to develop that, to read people, to know certain exercises. Sometimes they're going to be bored and you got to deal with it. Other times, some people need more circuits than others, or supersets. Some people just need to sit down and literally rest and be present. So I think it's just kind of evolved over time of like, I want people to be comfortable with heavy weight. I want people to be working through full ranges of motion and have that mobility. I want them to be conditioned, which I also kind of lump into having cardiovascular health, because they're not coming to the gym to run, right? Cardio can be done on your own.
Right.
You got to do it on your own. And that can be Stairmaster. And I navigate those things for people, like, hey, don't run for 2 hours after this. Ease into it. It's like weightlifting. You don't need to do 10 sets of one exercise.
Right.
Slowly get acclimated to it. So yeah, now I'm much more regimented in my approach. I'm definitely far from a bodybuilding coach these days. I don't do that anymore. I mean, you work hand in hand with me. You've seen my training style. It is... there are elements of bodybuilding. Bodybuilding can be great for people coming back from injuries. It can be great for elderly clients. People don't think of it that way, but it is a good a good way of getting things done for certain people, right? Like some people just need to isolate, right? It shouldn't all be compound exercises. We should learn the responsibility of each muscle and how there's a synergistic effect between them all, and how do we strengthen them, and how do we fix imbalances, how do we fix mobility issues, and how do we get you the most bang for your buck at $100 an hour. Right? And a lot of these people, I've had people pay in change, you know, and I take that as serious as I can. And you got to make it fun. It can't all be serious. They have to do the serious part, and that's put in the work, and you have to do your best duty and judgment to make the right calls, have the right experience, and write the right plan for each specific person. And a lot of people do the same stuff. You know, I mean, a lot of people need to train their core. They need to train their upper back. They need to work on their mobility. A lot of people have bad thoracic mobility. A lot of people have tight hips.
Yeah.
Probably 90% of the people we see. So you begin to see these parallels, and that kind of guides you in learning what works and what you need to do, and, you know, finding the right mentors and books and certifications that polish your skills. And so over time you evolve. I mean, everybody should have a background in each modality of fitness, in my opinion. Everybody should take notes from bodybuilding. Everybody should take notes from powerlifting. Everybody should take notes from chair chi. People should take notes from Olympic weightlifting. People should take, and you begin to see these pieces of like, oh, this I can use, you start to cherry pick for your style.
Right.
And then you realize, okay, I can't do 10 sets of 3 if I'm doing, you know, power work or agility work. I can't do a bunch of bodybuilding in this hour span because we need to focus more on whole body, core stability, or whatever.
Sure,
and you
right.
you choose each of those things. And then for each of those things, you've got 100 variations of it. That was one thing that bodybuilding was really good for, was I had just had an arsenal of exercises. And that was the only good thing that I took from it, because I was always like Mr. Variety, shock the muscle, all that stupid shit that you were learning in the late 90s, early 2000s. But that gave me a lot of access to exercises that I could manipulate in certain ways and find creativity with. And that was the one good thing about Lacey and Trevor, is they granted me the autonomy. They're like, here's your file, and go perform, like fill the file out the way we want, but this isn't like the precision way of programming.
Right.
We want to see what you can do. And that allowed me to experiment.
And get creative.
And then I've always been a student of weightlifting too. Like, I'm always in the gym. I go hard. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, I haven't done anything here, or I've done everything here, rather. And when I'm telling you to do it, just know that I've done it, right? I've done it all. I really have. I've been weightlifting now for 14 years. Just because I'm doing this for the past 3 doesn't mean that's what I've been doing for the past 11, right? And that's what people get messed up with. They're like, why aren't you doing 1,000 different exercises at this point? It's like, because I like what I like, and this works, and this is what's effective. I don't have a lot of time anymore, so I got to do the best variations that I can, and then that's applicable to my clients. That's why they come to me, is because they don't have the time for it anymore, and they don't want to spend the time to learn about it. They're high performers in their careers, so it's just a matter of I'm always progressing with something like that. There's always notes that I'm taking from, like I said, each modality of fitness, CrossFit even, like just you're sprinkling a little bit, and that's the art of it. You're turning math into art in a lot of ways, right? You're putting these numbers down, you're creating movement. It's like a dance with numbers, and you're creating this canvas of what you want this person to not only look like, and that, when I mean that, I mean not like aesthetically, but like they're sitting more upright. Like my 90-year-old client has better thoracic mobility. They have a little more muscle tone. They just look more confident. They carry themselves in a different way. They're more capable, and they're more competent. So there's never one thing that you should be adhering to, but just make sure that each piece that you're taking, to make sure that it's a solid piece to add to what you're trying to do. So that's just been my mindset with training, is I never want to get too comfortable. You always have to be studying this. I'm always looking at studies. I'm looking at things that kind of combat what I've thought to be true in the past and testing myself and, trying to take layers of my ego off, right? And that can be hard to do in this world of fitness and weightlifting and looking a certain way and lifting a certain amount.
All the influencers.
So just paying attention to coaches that are at a high level, right? The guys that have been doing it a long time at a very, very high level. Those are the ones that I listen to. It's not like I'm on Instagram looking at some 23-year-old dude who's doing another bicep workout.
Right.
Like you can only, that's, the key in everything is consistency. You can follow a piss poor program, and if you're doing it 100% of the time, that's going to beat the best program for the most part, unless you get injured or something. But generally speaking, like you just have to be consistent. So that's the other side of what we do is, it's a business of entertainment. We got to get them a good workout. We got to make improvements. But at the same time, they need to fall in love with something about it. And maybe that is just them like loving the friendship that they have with you, and there's no way in hell they're ever going to work out on their own. And that is the case. You can't save everybody. But you do want them to fall in love with something about it. And that can be with weight loss, muscle gain, feeling no pain, right? A lot of those things. So, that's...
Do you feel like that that weightlifting and exercise and training has helped with anxiety?
Oh yeah.
And I guess like how do you deal with that? Is it just weightlifting? Is it
Yeah, it's weightlifting. I mean, I have vices too. I usually can't fall asleep without an edible, so there's part of that. So I'm not going to say I'm Mr. Perfect by any means, but 100%. I mean, I would weightlift at 4 a.m. when I was in the Navy just to get rid of the anxiety that I had for the day. And obviously it doesn't get rid of all of it. And genetically, I think I'm a little more of an outlier than most people, just because of things from my childhood and ways, being an only child and dealing with a lot of things on my own gives you anxiety, right? But yeah, weightlifting definitely was always my medicine for that. I never wanted to take prescription drugs if I didn't have to. That was a big deal to me. I didn't want to take pills. I felt like it would take something away over time. So yeah, my daily dose of medicine was a can of tuna and pre-workout in the morning, and I'd go to the gym, I'd work out, and that would just take the edge off, and I felt like I got that done. It's like I did that, I made my bed, I've got these things accomplished. So in the worst case, I come home, I'm tired, but at least I got my workout in and my bed is made. You know what I'm saying? So there was always that. And that's definitely helped me. And obviously I've continued to do it because it helps me. And then you get benefits from it. Right? People respect you a little bit more. People look up to you a little bit more. It can grant you a career if you want it to. And yeah, definitely has helped. But other ways of combating it is just nutrition was another one too. And that obviously goes hand in hand with weightlifting, or it should at least. Just eating better generally made me feel better.
Right.
It made me look better, which also made me feel better.
Right.
But beyond that, it's just having hobbies, things that I'm interested in, everything from gaming to just different topics that I want to read about. Because I still love reading about fitness too. It's not something that I want to be away from at all times. And it's hard for me to read things that are outside of fitness because I feel like I'm doing a disservice to my clients, right?
Right.
And the people that ask me questions. So I always feel anxious when I'm reading, something that's fictional or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, just taking the time to be present in what I'm doing. And that could just be yard work, walking, although.
Soccer.
Definitely soccer. Soccer's number one, I think. Soccer is better than weightlifting, but it doesn't grant you as much as far as, I'd say, general health. Yeah, it's a cardiovascular form of fitness, right? Weightlifting supersedes that. I don't care what people say. Weightlifting's more important than cardio. Cardio's second to that, but yeah, soccer's great because in the moment, it's everything is wiped away from me. Sometimes I'll play a certain way because of things that I'm carrying, but I'm not thinking about those things.
Yep.
And I absolutely love soccer because of that. And it's just a great hobby to have, great things to practice and just dive into everything from the tactics side to my touch. That's whenever and you and I talked about this, but whenever I get in, I want to be into something.
Right. Yeah.
And some people they think they are, but really they're
not.
like, they're definitely not into it. They have this superficial understanding and it's cool, and the people around, they think it's cool. So they just kind of think they know it, but it's like, you don't really know it. And I want to like really get into something. And you only have so much time for that too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I also have superficial understandings of lots of things in my life, but when I really focus on something, I really want to get into it, and that's what makes it fun and exciting. Like I look forward to having the time to go and practice or do those things or read those things. So that's really helped me, of just kind of having my things that I like to work on and be good at, and not only physical things, but things for my mind, you know, practicing things and just repetition and reading and just getting into it and just going through those reps of learning.
Yeah. Do you feel like the anxiety that you have stems from a lot of things in the past? Is it just things like as in the past, as in like your childhood specifically? Maybe things that, stresses of things you want to accomplish, or things, places you want to go, things you want to do.
Yeah, I think you can have what I always say, paralysis by analysis. So I've got so many things that rotate through my head that gives me anxiety, and then I kind of like sometimes don't get anything done.
Right.
That's kind of the essence of procrastination too. For some people are just lazy and they're not thinking about it. But I like to think and have my plan, and I go over it in my head and I envision it in 1,000 different ways. And usually the negative ways, because when I was a kid, I just hated getting my hopes shot down. And I remember making this conscious decision of like, I'm never ever going to think of the perfect way that this could go.
Right.
Actually, and on the flip side, if I can stay as busy as possible to not think about that thing, the better it'll turn out. Because as long as I don't have any expectation attached to it, I'll feel better. And obviously that can't last. I was 12 when I made that decision, and now it's like I have to think about it a little bit to get ready for it, or whatever I need to do, and make that plan and get to it. But honestly, I lost my train of thought.
You're good. No, just anxiety, where it stems from, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say where it stems from, right? I mean, genetically, some people are just sadder than others. Some people are smarter than others.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think just you're born with these, I hate to call it an illness, because you can direct it towards something positive. Anxiety can be a really powerful tool if it's guided in the right direction. I like to think of it as just unguided energy.
Okay.
It's just kind of buzzing in your system, and it makes things turn and move, but you're kind of stepping on the gas, hearing the engine run, but you can't find a gear.
You're staying in place.
That's sometimes how my anxiety feels. I've got this burning sensation of like I'm late for something, or I've got to like get this thing accomplished. But it also stems from just uneasiness of past trauma. I went through things that people really shouldn't have to go through at a young age, and we don't have to dive into that too deeply, but I think people see, and I'm in no way, I don't ever want to be a victim, and I don't ever want people to pity me, right? But when you're an only child, you're navigating the world in a really different kind of way, and you're figuring things out on your own, by yourself. And I had a lot of close friends growing up, because you're drawn to making a strong connection with somebody because you want to feel included, loved, find some resemblance of a sibling, because I always wanted a sibling, but it wasn't going to happen with my parents. And then just growing up in a house, like, my parents were great, and if they watch this, I don't want them to feel bad about it.
Yeah, of course.
But just when you're growing up by yourself and your parents are fighting all the time, screaming, and you're in your room thinking it's about you. I feel like when I was really young and listening to stuff getting thrown, people screaming, you think it's you.
Right.
And so your whole childhood,
right. You don't know any better.
Yeah, and then it's like when it is not you, you're just more relieved than actually thinking critically as a kid, which you can't do. And so it just like, okay, it wasn't me, but maybe next time it will be.
Okay, yeah.
And that's kind of where I put a lot of it, is like kind of being brought up that way. But it was just in me too. Like I would just be like on edge all the time with, especially sports. Track was a big sport in my life. I was good at it. I had a lot of pressure on me, but just like getting there, getting ready, getting warmed up, it's just like all the eyes are on you in a lot of ways, and the gun, and you're waiting for it to go off. And I was just like, I felt like I was on the verge of a fucking anxiety attack every time I went out there. And that's when I realized that I had something that, like, I was just nervous, and I just thought I was a coward, or I didn't know what anxiety was, so I thought I was a pussy, basically. I was just like, I thought I was weak. And I just would look around like, how the hell is everybody handling it like this, or laughing? Those kids are like playing tag right now in between the races. It's just like, I just always, but I had nobody to bounce things off of. Anxiety.
All the good stuff. Tell me about your shirt a little bit.
Well, Brooke made this for me.
Oh, did she?
Yeah. Well, technically Phil did.
Okay. Yeah.
EMBB. Shout out to Phil. Brooke and him secretly made me this.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's not really my style to like wear stuff like this, but I thought, for this video, why not?
Right.
Figured I'd represent. So, yeah, basically just tribute to Luke. It's more of a piece that I just keep in my closet and look at it. I don't really wear it. This is honestly basically the first time I've worn it.
Okay, yeah. Who is Luke to you?
Luke was, for a long time, my best friend. When I went into the Navy, Luke and I kind of went our separate ways. When I got in, smartphones still weren't a thing. It was just kind of like T9 word text messages. I had MySpace, for Christ's sake. So I wasn't, when you went somewhere, you were still gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was a time where Luke, amongst a lot of people, were getting into opiates. And Luke and I were just a jolly pair of dudes in high school. I met him my sophomore year. And he's just like, he was on the heavier side, and he was the most beautiful, graceful person I'd ever seen on a soccer ball. It was just hilarious. It was funny. And he felt insecure because we would laugh when he'd play, but we were laughing because it was so bizarre to see somebody that big and strong, that light on their feet. It was incredible. And him and I fell in love with soccer. I mean, we were both like skater punk kids, and just had played soccer our whole lives. It was just something that we kind of stuck with. It was never really my favorite sport growing up. I was more of like a karate, basketball type kid. My uncle was 6'9", and he had a big influence on me early on. So basketball was definitely my focal point. But soccer was just kind of always like, basketball's over, you want to play soccer? So I just it was along with basketball. And then I realized I just really sucked at basketball and sucked a little less at soccer. So I kept playing soccer. Still working on that suck part. But so Luke and I sucked at soccer together. And he was a grade below me, and we just hung out all through high school. And we had a lot in common in the sense of, we had that shared anxiety. Nothing we ever talked about, but you just know, like you can look at somebody and kind of get a feel for it. So Luke and I definitely had demons that we had been dealing with, and kind of confided in each other early on when we were teenagers. And we just rode that bench hard together in high school. I was just his ultimate hype man, and he was mine. And we've been like that forever, because it felt like we were cheering ourselves on in a selfish way, like, because we had so much in common that, you know, you're trying to achieve the same thing, but you're fighting a lot of the same demons. And like, I would fill his shoes in different ways and he was like he was so good at school, played every instrument, and I wanted those things. I wanted to skip class all week and still get 110% in biology like Luke did. Like, that kid blew me away. Like, when I'd sit next to him in class and I'd look over his paper, I'm like, you weren't here all week. And you did the extra credit questions too? I'm looking at my C- and I'm like, what the fuck, dude? And then just got into soccer. He didn't even play it as long as I did, and was just so graceful on it. So everything he did, he just had this touch of just uniqueness and grace. And it's just one of the most remarkable people I had ever met. But he just didn't, you know, when you get out of high school, he had the ability to go to college, but he was so punk rock that he didn't really want to put himself out there for scholarships.
Yes, yeah.
And academically, it's like, you're going to get, sure, you get a 4.0, but it doesn't mean Harvard's going to be at your door. A lot of people get 4.0s.
Right.
But he was a genius. Like, he had something there. And people that have that light also have darker demons than most people can even comprehend. And that's why they are busy doing what they're doing, right? I wish I could have this anxiety and be that smart. And Luke got that card. He got that genius card. I've never seen anybody that just talented with things. And I'm not just hyping him up. I'm being like, objectively, it was incredible what he could just do on the fly like that. So yeah, and that time when I got back from Argentina, all those guys were still kind of like milling around. It was just kind of like school's out and summer's never ending. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Luke was just doing the waiter thing and making a lot of money doing that and hanging out with his buddies and making music. And I was off, you know, doing my thing in the Navy. And I remember when I came back and I got in touch with my high school soccer coach, Tim Gootflesh, and he was like, yeah, we're doing some kick arounds for these young guys. Why don't you come out and we'll do an alumni game, come out, show these guys what's up, come practice with us. And so, of course, I wanted to call all the troops.
Right.
I was like, Jose,
Get
Mike, Gilmer, Yvonne, where's everybody at? Let's go. These kids don't know what's coming.
Right.
And the only person really I could get a hold of was Luke.
Yeah.
And got a hold of him, and when he showed up, he was, to me, emaciated and pale and sweaty. And I was like, did you run 10 miles to get here? Like, what's going on? And it was off, and it was really one of the most disturbing things I'd ever seen. You know, I felt like I'd come home and there was a zombie apocalypse in my town. Because other people had OD'd that I had known, like Robbie Ritchie. He was a good friend of mine, and I heard he had died, and that was one of Luke's really close friends on that whole punk rock skater boy thing they had going. And so you had heard like a couple people had gone under,
right.
And but I thought Luke was just too smart for that, and he was like deep into a heroin binge that day that I saw him. We were putting on our cleats. I turned around, he was gone. He was maybe there for 10 minutes. And I honestly thought that was it. I just thought that we wouldn't really talk again. I didn't want to be around that. I didn't know how to deal with that. And he had texted me like a couple weeks later, hey, my trash bag ripped in downtown Portland. Can you come help pick it up? I was like, I can't come to downtown Portland and help you pick up your stuff. Like, what are you doing? And then it went a while and didn't hear from him again. And you always worry with stuff like that. You know, You're always wondering when you're going to get that call.
Right.
And then finally he texted me, and he seemed like he was clear-headed. And we ended up meeting at La Prinzi's, which is this dope gym out by Hawthorne. It's the oldest gym in Oregon. It's sick. And that gym had a partnership with his halfway house, his Oxford house, and they offered free memberships for all the guys in the house if they came and cleaned the gym in the mornings. And so he got into weightlifting. Wow. And he really got into it. He got into it so much he beat me to a 405 squat before I could even get to it. And he, of course, Luke being Luke, he was just good at it. He figured it out. So we started working out together. And started working out together, got back into gaming together so we could play games together. Soccer, like really tried to rekindle our friendship. And, you just go through life, and I think things just, you get weight off your shoulders in some ways, and you gain weight with other things as you go along. And it's just when you get that taste, I guess, it's always kind of over your head, right? The addiction never truly leaves, and that's the battle with a true addict like that. Like I mentioned before, I had gotten addicted to opiates because of my surgery, but I never really felt, once I got through that it was still kind of
so
there.
Not like something you needed.
Yeah, I just didn't need it after a while. And it just seemed like Luke, it was just kind of there.
Yeah.
And you never wanted to like drink around him. I never wanted to like potentially smoke a joint around it. I felt guilty if I did anything that was outside of sobriety.
Right.
And sometimes that makes you drift away from people too, but I wanted to make sure that in some capacity I was a good influence for him. And I was. And at this time, like, I'm in college, I'm a trainer now. I did a bodybuilding show. He came out to the bodybuilding show. He thought it was awesome. He got into bodybuilding. He introduced me to our buddy Jordan, who I'm one of my best friends now. And they were, so we had this group of just, it was weightlifting. We share videos together, share workouts together, work out together, and just hype each other up. And then Luke got into school, and he was getting his master's. Met somebody named Jocelyn, who was awesome. But here and there, people relapse, and you might have 2 years. I mean, there was a point where he was 2 years clean, and I thought, like, and he's in class, he's a teacher's aide, he's grading papers, like, you can see him making these huge leaps. And I think it was just a lot for him. And sometimes I think I hyped him up too much, and I have a lot of guilt with that.
Sure.
Because I thought he was like getting built up so much that he had to succeed.
Right.
And I wish I could have had, a conversation with him that I just wanted to like, I'm there for you, not, and people need to know what you're doing, I thought. And there's bits and pieces that, that's true, but sometimes I feel like I did too much. And, cause I feel guilty when people are like, oh man, Josh is so good at bodybuilding or whatever.
Sure.
Oh, like my mom telling somebody about me. Like, I don't need people to hype me up like that. I don't need that. I don't want to live up to something maybe that you misinterpreted or, whatever.
Right. So
maybe he carried some of that. And, so it was when I got the call from Jordan that Luke had passed away, it was just something that you're waiting for someone else to call you. Like, you're waiting for the police to say, no, he's in the hospital, he's in critical, you're like, wait, you're in disbelief. It's cliche to say, but that's kind of what it feels like. And then it's slow, you just sit there, and I'm just like fighting it, but you feel it taking over you. And then I just imagining what he looks like dead in his car, and the cops giving him mouth to mouth. And he had done a lot of things in his life, that he regretted, and it was hard for him to carry that weight. I know that. And you can't help people carry everything and all the weight that they have.
Right.
But you try to be there and let them know that you're there without letting them know.
Yeah.
Like certain moments should last long enough for them to know that you have their back, I guess. Yeah, so when he passed away, we'll never know if it was, I don't know if it was suicide, and I don't know if it was just a fentanyl overdose. I don't know. But he overdosed, and they couldn't bring him back. And that had happened before. I've been through that before. I've heard of him doing that before, rather. And yeah, I mean, he blessed me with two awesome friends, Martin and Jordan. Those were two guys that I met that are just awesome human beings that I really look up to and admire. And Luke would definitely be just ecstatic that we're still friends.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Luke was the main guy that I would confess things to, talk to. You know, it's almost like he was going through more than I was, which allowed me to like feel that he could understand what I was saying,
right.
you know?
Yeah.
Like I've done some dark shit that I have to live with for the rest of my life, forever. And I'm never going to share that with anybody. And Luke was that one person that I was fortunate to share it with, because his demons, like I said, were so much darker than mine. And it was easy for him like that. You know, he would always guide me along that way of like, why are you so upset? Like you were 16, 17,
yeah.
18. Why you can't carry that with you? Look at what you're doing now. And that's
right.
another thing with training too. I think subconsciously I wanted to give back and help people, because I destroyed so much unknowingly in a lot of ways. When I was younger, I just had a completely different attitude than I do now. And Luke was there with me when I was getting into trouble and doing all these terrible things. He was right there. I mean, he went through it too. And we would always talk about those things, you know.
Yeah.
Almost like a sick pride that we had from where we started to where we are now.
Right.
Like I do have a sick pride about it. Like what I used to do, I never want my clients to know like the things that I went through, but it's like I can tell you with a certainty that this person you see now was not who I was, you know, 10 plus years ago. We were getting just around the wrong people, doing the wrong things, hurting a lot of people. And Luke went beyond that. Not that he was hurting people, but it's, you know, sometimes you get that misdirection, like your environment, right? Your environment guides you in certain directions. I don't think there's, it was just hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard, and it still is hard. It wasn't even a year ago. And then to, you know, top that off, you're trying to grieve for your best friend, and then your grandma dies.
Right.
So that was really compounding, and that definitely is something I'm still recovering from, and still emotionally managing that while trying to maintain relationships and not become a recluse. And there's no guidebook for any of this shit. You're just kind of going on your own. And again, as an only child, I'm just kind of like,
what do I do now?
Well, you're just on your own. You don't have a sibling. You don't have somebody that you went through life with. And Luke was pretty close to that for me. And then that's taken from you. And then this wave of anxiety comes over you like you're alone again. And I have a great support system. My parents are great. My friends are great. I'm very fortunate for sure. I don't want anybody to fucking feel sorry for me. But nobody should lose their best friend like that. I should be fucking 90 years old and doing this podcast talking about how Luke died yesterday at 89 and I beat him. Yeah. But I'll see him soon. Yeah. I should be having that conversation, not this.
Right.
And somebody just with that much potential. It wasn't like he was this deadbeat dude that just kind of, we were friends in high school this one time and then I heard he died. It wasn't like that. I mean, we had a strong connection. I had just talked to him and he died the next day. Yeah, so learning how to manage that, you know, I know on this podcast we wanted to talk about that. I'm still learning how to do it. I'm still learning that, you know, sometimes a bad day is from that and sometimes a bad day isn't from that. And grief is a hell of a thing. It goes up, it goes down, it goes away for a month, it comes back for a week, and it shows its face in many different ways. And I'm just continuing to navigate that and remembering that, you know, the best advice to me from a friend who lost their brother from a drug overdose, he told me that he said he sat there for 2 years being sad and feeling shitty And it's like, would my brother want me to feel shitty because he lost his life? Is that what he would want? No, you're supposed to live for that person. You're supposed to move forward. They don't want you to stop your life because theirs ended.
Right.
That makes no sense at all, especially Luke. He would want me to play soccer. He'd
course.
want me to continue
Of course.
weightlifting. He'd want me to be a good influence on people. He would want me to stay away from all those vices, right? He'd want me to be proactive in that. And that's what I have to remind myself. That's not just something you tell yourself once or you write on your door before you go out. It's like, it's a constant thing. And I might have to do that for the rest of my fucking life. And that's okay. You know, people have way worse problems than me. But again, it was fucking hard, dude. And it's still really, really hard. And I try not to let it bleed into my life right now, but sometimes it does.
I mean, it's natural. That's something that you can't help. But I think you're doing a good job with just being able to grieve and, you know, let people know that, oh yeah, I'm still going through something, but, you know, I'm still going to do what I need to do.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's huge. That's strong. Like,
yeah.
And kudos to that, honestly. Not a lot of people would come back from that kind of thing.
Yeah, I just don't want it to cripple me and just let me fail at everything. Because I was riding that edge.
Yeah.
I was riding that edge of just like, I don't give a fuck. Life's not fair. Does God exist?
Right.
You know, a lot of
things.
Deep introspective questions, and just a lot of pity for myself and just self-loathing and just shitty stuff.
Yeah.
But you just wake up and you just get out of bed and you go down and you start your coffee and you get your stuff ready for the gym. And you get in your car and you put on your podcast and you go to the gym and you go to work and you just try to just keep that momentum. And depression is one of those things that's kind of, that inhibits that momentum. And anxiety and depression go hand in hand on it, obviously. But yeah, those are, it's just a matter of routine.
Yeah.
And just trying to maintain that routine and keep as many negative things out of that routine. So that's right now how I'm getting through it. Therapy's another thing, but the VA sucks so fucking bad that it just blows my mind. So that's another thing that I'm venturing into is, you know, talking with somebody, but at the same time, I need to take time to internalize things too. I don't always have to talk. I feel like it's not a toxic masculine trait.
Okay.
I think stoicism can sometimes keep things inside, right? And you don't cry and you just keep your chin up and keep moving forward. I think periodically people need to check in. I don't think I need to see a therapist every other day or weekly. I just need, I don't know, closure on things, or as I progress, like things I might need to work on and help, things I need to work on that can help other people, right? I want to show up to work and be jolly and ready to go. I don't want to be having this dark cloud loom over my head. And I don't want to be a victim either. I don't want people to think I have a victim mentality of like, oh, my friend died, therefore I can treat you like this.
Right.
You know, and sometimes I do need space. I do, but at the same time, I don't want it to, like I said, bleed into what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, just living in the honor of Luke and being productive in the honor of Luke is the best that I can do.
Yeah, and I think continuing to do that, that's, like you said, that's exactly what he would want.
Yeah, but that's the never-ending battle. It's not like you just forget about it, right? It's every day I think about it. Yeah. It's just how long do I think about it, and how much does it disrupt my day?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's a process, especially sharing the grief between two people. Like, am I grieving for Luke? Well, my grandma just died. Should I grieve for my grandma? I can't grieve for them both. I'm grieving different ways for both of them. I mean, it couldn't get any worse, right? It's like what could get worse. My parents get in a fucking plane and it crashes too. And then my dog gets cancer. Like, yeah, it could get worse, I'm sure. But geez, it's like,
right.
Man, it's just your best friend dies and then your grandma dies and you watch your grandma die. Yeah. It's a lot. It's really just a lot. And I'm just so like tired from it. I don't even feel depressed most days. I just feel tired.
Exhausted.
Yeah, just tired. Just burned out from just life.
Yeah.
It's like it took a piece of my soul and I can't pick my body up with my soul as much as I could. Yeah, so that was Luke.
Yeah. Managing that kind of stuff is day to day, right? Mm-hmm. Day to day.
Yeah.
And then on top of, obviously, all of the responsibilities you have, work, relationships.
Yeah, thankfully I don't have kids right now. Dogs.
One of us.
Yeah. Right.
You got dogs, you got a girlfriend.
Yeah, I have responsibility. Yeah. I'm 34, so you should have some by the time you're
so.
34. But I play video games on the weekend and relax, thank God. Maybe kids would be good. I really don't know, but not right now. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure the day you have kids, it'll be a blessing to you. It'll be stressful, for sure.
Yeah, I hope it's not just karma catching up to me. And this little hellion Josh running around like, I know what you're doing, buddy.
Yeah. I've been there.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's the last thing. Let me share you a couple of stories, and don't be scared of Dad after this, okay?
Yeah. So having to manage that, we'll close up. And what are, obviously we've gone through kind of dealing with anxiety, or what you do to deal with anxiety. Mm-hmm. The things that you're doing to manage, things that have gone on with Luke, your grandma, life. Mm-hmm. If you could tell your younger self something, like a piece of advice on anything, what would you want to tell your younger self to? Maybe, obviously it won't change the outcome of life, but maybe something that you wish you could have known, maybe something about friendship, something about,
Yeah, I think yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I know it's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question. Well, number one, I would say slow down. Yeah, I would say slow down and just take time to appreciate how good moments can be when you're that young, and to not be looking for the next thing immediately. Thank God I didn't have a smartphone back then. Thank God. But yeah, just to slow down and appreciate those moments, because these friendships and this feeling doesn't last forever. And adulthood has its cons. Pros and cons, but you just have to be ready for a different batch of problems that you don't have right now, and to enjoy that. And then I would say, especially for a young man on his own, to find the right mentors and to understand that there's much more depth to the things around you. Things are much more nuanced than you think. So get into something positive, learn everything you know about it, and you'll see it in other things, right?
Yeah.
I love the quote, if you know the way broadly, you'll see it in all things. I love that quote. And just slow down, take your time with things, find your hobbies, be invested in them. And quality mentorship, I think, would be, those would be the key points.
Yeah.
I could talk to my younger self for hours. Don't do this, don't do this, don't touch that.
Don't talk to that person.
Don't talk to that person. That person's not your friend. They say they are, but they're not. But I think just like if I had just a few minutes, those are the things I would say to let them just sit on and think on.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all of those things. I know it's a lot to just be able to share those
That was
things.
good. I mean, we talked about it. I wanted to bring up Luke. I felt like I want to look back at this, especially, and see like who I was at 34. Maybe I'll watch this when I'm 75.
And, I mean, and honestly, that was kind of what I was thinking. I was like, oh shoot, I think this would be a great opportunity for Josh to just have a piece of, something he can look back on. Like, oh shoot, this is what happened then, and like this is how I was feeling, and all of those things. But
hopefully I look back on this and I've accomplished more, but also just feel better about things just in general.
And I think you will.
I think so too.
Yeah, and it takes time, right?
Yep. Hasn't been a year, so I'm definitely got to give it time.
Yeah.
But I can't sit on it forever either.
Right.
So I appreciate you and being prepared for this, and it was fun. I've always wanted to do a podcast. So.
Yeah, and then we'll do it again for sure.
Yeah.
Like we'll do a less serious one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But just let everybody know. I don't know if you care to like let everybody know where you're at or what you're doing, like where they can find you.
You can find me at Precision right now, Joshua Lieb on Instagram, and if you want to just rage on some PS5, Lieb the Dweeb. Yeah.
Sweet.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you want to follow us here on YouTube, make sure to follow us and subscribe down below. Comment your favorite part about this episode and make sure to hit that bell notification. If you want to follow us on our audio podcast, make sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you so much for watching this episode. We will see you in the next one. Peace out.